Next item is item number 5. It's an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan at 75 Rockefeller Plaza, aka 15-19 West 51st Street, 14-36 West 52nd Street, Rockefeller Center, an individual landmark. This is docket number 166756. An office tower designed by Robert Carson and Earl London with Wallace Harrison and built in 1946 as part of an Art Deco style office, commercial, and entertainment complex. The application is to create window openings at the tower and replace paving at the entry portal.
They did something.
To the right. And then the box.
Okay, yeah, open.
Narrows out.
Okay. Catherine Red, Preservation Department staff. Application is for work, excuse me, 75 Rockefeller Plaza in the Rockefeller Center Historic District. It's located here. The application is to install windows at the crown of the building on the north, east, west facades at the 32nd floor in these locations up here. And the application also includes replacing terrazzo at the 52nd Street entrance portal, which is recessed, which you've seen previously, presently pinkish beige with an off-white terrazzo. The applicants, Joe and Clayton of King's Place Park, and architects from KPI here to talk about the proposal.
You got it. Back. Okay. Good morning, Commissioners. Yoan Kleeman, Higgins Place Park and Partners. I'm here with the design team for 75 Rockefeller Plaza. It's the building here at the north end of the plaza at the center. To give you a little bit of background, historical background, this was built as the headquarters for Standard Oil, Rockefeller's own Standard Oil company. Originally, the proposal was to continue the plaza all the way up to 53rd Street, where the Museum of Modern Art was built in order to create a cultural center. However, because they could not obtain the site of the 21 Club, Rockefeller instead plugged off the center here with the construction of this building. What we're looking at here is the plaza-facing facade. This is really the dominant design facade of the building. It commands a view into the plaza, and as I said, it caps it off. Some historical renderings of the building. It gives you an idea of the footprint of the building. As you can see here, it was called a post-war skyscraper. It was built in 1946 to 47 by Carson and London. And it has this very prismatic shaft that rises out of a T-shaped base. It continues, though, the architectural language of the rest of the center with the large limestone piers and the aluminum spandrel panels in between the windows. Again, we get another view in this rendering here that shows 75 Rockefeller Plaza right here, plugging off the plaza at its north axis. I'll call your attention to what we can see here on the roof. There is this deep well right here where mechanical equipment was located, and this is relevant to our proposal, as you will see here. I'm going to begin with these existing and proposed plans of the 32nd floor, just to show you some of the interior design changes that are really driving this proposal. As you can see, currently there is an elevator shaft and machine room right in the middle of the floor plate, associated mechanical rooms off to the west. This is the west facade here. This is the south plaza-facing facade, the east facade here, and the north facade. There's a large mechanical area here, and then there is this very deep well where the cooling equipment is located. Cooling equipment at the time was very large and bulky, and since then we've come a long way, and we can install much smaller HVAC equipment in the building. So what the applicant is proposing is to install this smaller HVAC equipment, which then frees up all the floor space on the 32nd floor and allows this to be converted into usable tenant space. Associated with that proposal, we are proposing to glaze the openings on the west, north, and east facades. Currently, there are 4 windows on the west facade and 7 windows on the east facade. With all this space freed up with the moving of the mechanical equipment, we're proposing to continue that line of windows around the entire building. This shows essentially the same thing in section. We can see this very deep well where the cooling equipment is located and the partial 32nd floor. By installing smaller cooling equipment here and building an elevator machine room that bumps up slightly onto the roof. This is, by the way, being handled at staff level. You'll see it in the drawings because it doesn't make any sense without it, but we're applying for this at staff level. The 32nd floor then becomes entirely usable space, and associated with that, we are proposing to install the windows. This is, again, the primary 51st Street plaza-facing facade. This is what we see here, a line of windows at the 32nd floor, and then about 20 feet of spandrel and limestone piers above that. This is not being changed at all in this proposal. On the northwest and east elevations, we can see the facades that we are proposing to be changed. Again, on the west elevation, we see that there are 4 windows that turn the corner from the primary facade. And on the east elevation, there are 7 windows that turn the corner. The proposal is to continue this line of windows here around the back at the 32nd floor and then onto the east facade for these remaining bays. Just one note to make sense of this proposal. You will see on the existing photographs various different louvers, some at the 31st floor, some in other locations. We already had a C&E to replace these louvers with new windows. So that is also part of a separate proposal that's already been approved. A few view studies coming from the west first. Here we are at 50th Street. Existing over here, you can see those 4 windows extending onto the side of the building, and we are proposing to continue that line of windows. Moving up to 51st, you get a full view of the west facade. Again, the 4 windows being extended to an entire line. Finally, at 52nd Street, we're seeing the same thing. There is a very small window of visibility from 53rd Street, right in front of MoMA, where you can see the north facade. There are currently no windows at that level. We're proposing to continue the 32nd floor line of windows around from the other facades. And then from the east, right in front of St. Pat's, basically, we can see the 7 windows here, which we're proposing to continue around the side of the building. This is just a close-up view of the proposal. Again, here are those louvers in window openings that are being replaced with windows under a separate permit. And then above that here at the 32nd floor, which is where we are proposing to install new windows. I have a series of line drawings here, perhaps too many line drawings, so I'm just going to move through it a little bit more quickly than I otherwise would. But you can see existing and proposed elevations. You can see this elevator machine room on the top here, which is not part of the proposal. This is the 51st Street facade. We're proposing no changes here.
And why is it not part of it?
It's not visible, yes. 52nd Street, the north-facing facade, existing and proposed. Here is an enlarged elevation showing the line of windows continue to the 32nd Street, 32nd floor rather. Here we are on the east facade, 7 windows being continued across. And on the west facade, where there are 4 windows, and we're proposing to continue that line. Again, these sections and plans that are just showing the proposed interior and mechanical changes that are driving the entire project replacing the cooling tower and bumping up the elevator machine room. And this is a roof plan showing how far set back the elevator machine room is. We're providing window details. These are the same windows that are approved for the entire center as part of a master plan that was approved about 5 years ago. They're the standard, one of several designs that are standard for the center. They're going to match the other buildings, other windows that are on the building. And then we come to the second part of the proposal for 75 Rockefeller Plaza. Here on the 52nd Street facade, we have a recessed entry. Currently, there is pink terrazzo that's been installed in this location in the recessed entry. Originally, this pink terrazzo continued the pink terrazzo that was existing in the interior lobby. There was a feature of a post-war skyscraper, as you all know, to sort of break down the barriers between interior and exterior and create this continuity of paving, and this provided that effect. Currently, the terrazzo that is there, the pink terrazzo, is in fairly poor condition. We don't know exactly when it was installed, but currently it's in fairly bad condition. There have been many alterations at this area, including the replacement of some of the revolving doors. So we know that there have been some changes here. If you look close up, you can see that there are some areas of terrazzo that do not match, areas of cracking, and other alterations. I'll just point out here also that this terrazzo is not actually called out in the LVC designation report for the building. So what we're proposing to do is to remove the existing pink terrazzo and install new white terrazzo. We have a sample here. This is a sample of the approved interior paving material. What's going to be installed on the exterior, what we would like to install on the exterior will be the same. It'll be a large white aggregate with a sort of palish white matrix, but it'll have a slightly different finish in order to provide the texture for prevent against slip and fall. We are proposing, this by the way shows the existing entry configuration here, and this shows a entry configuration that was approved under a previous certificate of appropriateness. You can see that the paving plan, the size of the pavers, changes slightly in the proposal, and that is because we're trying to sort of rationalize the way that the joints meet up with mullions, and to sort of keep with the overall spirit of the building, which has a much more modular design. What exists currently does not really achieve that same rationality.
I just have a quick question. So the pink terrazzo, that's historic, correct? But the report didn't identify it as a feature?
It's not mentioned in the report.
Okay, and in the existing condition, you've got your, I guess, the revolving doors, and you have a sort of some kind of transition over there. I'm not sure actually what it is. And behind that, in the interior, you have this new terrazzo. Is that correct?
That's in the process of being installed currently.
Okay,
yes.
which it got through a C&E or something from
Correct.
at staff level. So I'm just trying to understand whether the changes that you've made to the doors in this version brings the interior floor more connected to the portion that's outside, and is that different from what it was before?
Well, this area here will be glazed, and you'll be able to see into the lobby where this white terrazzo will be installed. So the idea was that by installing a identical material out here, cementitious white terrazzo, we would be able to sort of establish this continuity of interior and exterior.
Okay, but historically, so in its previous condition or its original condition, the floor within the existing building and the flooring outside, was that the same? So it was the pinkish
Yes.
terrazzo before?
Previously, or the existing, we don't actually know historically, as I said, it's not called out in the
Okay.
1985, but the existing condition, the terrazzo and the exterior and the interior matched. What we're proposing is terrazzo on the interior and exterior that match, just with basically a different matrix color. We're still using the same large white aggregate that was used in the existing terrazzo, just instead of using the pink matrix, we're proposing a lighter off-white matrix.
Did you change
Okay.
the pattern of the flooring on the inside as well? In other words, you're changing the pattern on the outside, and the objective in keeping the same color is to create the same continuity that was there before, but did you change the pattern?
The
Which
pattern
would
on the
disrupt the,
interior.
yeah, which would disrupt the continuity.
The project architect here is.
Yeah, the path, sorry, I'm Richard Nemeth, I'm with Patterson Fox Architects. The pattern, I'm not sure exactly what your question is, but the pattern inside and the pattern here.
Right, the grooves,
Right.
I
Yeah,
think that's what
these
you're talking
grooves are
about.
specifically to line up with the mullions, and our mullions here line up with the mullions in the original design as well. And where we found a little bit of a disconnect was that the grid that we found on the existing building today doesn't actually line up with the modules of the building, and they were extremely rigorous back then. I mean, everything in the building traced around, you could draw these lines around everything. So we were a little surprised that this was the one area that we found in the ground floor that didn't align. So we went back and our assumption was that that had been changed over the years, just like the revolving doors had been replaced. And the terrazzo in the revolving doors, we noticed matched the pink terrazzo out here. But we can see in the old photographs that the revolving doors have been replaced. So we assumed that they had replaced the terrazzo probably in the 60s or 70s. What we were trying to do is bring back the rigor of the grid lines, lining up with the mullions in the original design, which is the same as the mullion location design.
Right, but the interior, does it follow through in the interior? Okay.
Can I ask a question about, on page 7? Okay, the north elevation, which you indicated has no, and we can see has no, it's not interrupted with 4 or 7 windows. What is the actual material above the louvered windows that's not, do you see there on the two,
Yeah.
the 2 and the 2? What is that?
So there's some solid cast aluminum spandrels.
Solid
There-
cast aluminum
And
and,
there are some places where there is like a perforated spandrel.
And
or
so-
just sort of a louver.
and what was that used for? Was it ventilation or was it actually, could you see through it? I mean, were there,
It's for ventilation. This all opens into either that deep well, I think, let's see if we can see in the plan. So it would be into this open space here. I'm not sure if that's in that deep well where
Right.
the cooling towers are located or if it's some other.
do you have any details of that or dimensions on it? Could one see through it, is my question.
I don't have any.
When you're in the well, you cannot see through.
I want to understand the profile on that system. So,
It's a double layer, actually. There's the aluminum spandrel, which has kind of the gaps in it.
yeah,
Then inside of that aluminum spandrel, they have another layer of some sort of a louver system. So when you stand in the mechanical well,
right. And let's say you were wanting to keep or mimic the exterior layer, the visible one, rather than the interior one. Might you be able to see through it?
I think you'd see a little bit through. You'd have these little rectangular slots that they had cut in.
So they're rectangular slots, but they're not chamfered. In other words, they're not also baffled, so that,
I don't believe that they.
okay.
I don't believe that they are chamfered. I think they're just. It was part of the casting. They actually cast those in. They're on these aluminum spindles. They have these vertical, sort of half-rounded elements, and then between those vertical round half elements, they left these little gaps.
Right, and you get why I'm asking, right?
Right, because you want to, and
I don't think it would feel
I think
like
the question is, can you have transparency but still have these lines that continue down? So
On the
it's-
north side. Right now, I'm just focusing on the north
Right,
side, because the
because the
north side
north
is the
side-
one case where there are no windows that have been inserted into that tall sort of cornice piece.
Understood.
Yeah.
Difficult to answer that unless we took off the outer layer and looked through that screen, but I do believe it's probably a low percentage of actual vision looking out. In other words, you could put a glass window in front of it.
Yeah.
Look through the glass
Right.
window.
That's
and
right.
try and look through them, but you get like
Right.
look more like a kind of a gun turret type of slotted,
Maybe.
very dashed
Maybe.
look.
Interesting, huh? Yeah.
All right, any other questions? Okay, we can take, yes, Roberta?
The reason for changing the color, so I understand you're changing the size and the configuration because you want it to line up with mullions, but what is the reason again for the color change of the terrazzo from the pink to the white?
Because the inside is already be changed, or is in the process of
but-
changing.
The Okay, so it's to match the inside, and because we don't think that that's original, the outside, we don't believe that that's original, is that what we're?
We don't know if it's original. It's deteriorated. There are areas of replacement that do not match. But yes, the proposal is to match what's in the interior.
Okay, any other questions right now? Okay, we'll take testimony. Barbara Zay?
Barbara Zay of the Historic Districts Council. Our committee does not object to the window openings at the tower, but would prefer that the historic pink terrazzo paving at the terrace, along with its original panel pattern, be retained. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more speakers on this item? All right, comments? Yes, any comment? Yeah.
No, I spoke already. You go ahead.
I think this is a very sensitive, overall sensitive, slight reconfiguration at the top of the building, which I can certainly support. And I'm persuaded by the presentation that changing the terrazzo slightly to another color that relates to the interior is something that would have been respected and understood by the original building architects, and so I would support it.
All right, other comments? Yes,
Yeah,
Addie?
I do want, I just would be interested in seeing what it would mean to retain the more opaque quality on the north side top. Just because I think that, if, I don't know if we could see that still, but to look at it again, click through, sir.
She'd like to see
Yeah.
the current.
Because I think that proportion, just to have a vestige of it, would be worthwhile exploring. Of an unfenestrated, one of the facades being sort of unbroken, and having, what is it, would it be like 30 feet? Is it 30 feet about? When it's not broken with a window? The existing unbroken height. The height of the, let's call it a cornice there. Okay, the height of the cornice unbroken by windows is what, like 30 feet? 20 feet?
Well,
Which is, what did you say?
It's 20 feet on the south, east, and west facades, this distance from the 32nd
Right.
floor to here.
I'm asking about the unbroken.
I assume 30 feet.
Yeah,
The
that's,
only thing about that north facade,
Yeah.
it's only really minimally visible from a public thoroughfare. The prominent facades are the east and west. Is that right, east and west facades?
It's mainly just, as I said, from a very small window on 53rd Street. You can see in between two buildings that you can catch this north elevation.
that's where you caught it?
Yeah.
It's right up against the new Baccarat Hotel.
Oh, yeah. I see.
Sorry, supposed to speak into the microphone, but I think the Baccarat Hotel is right here.
Uh-huh.
So basically it blocks that, primarily blocks the towers. There's another building there. So the only slot, I think, was this little, that little gap is the only place you can really see that building now. From farther away you get, the more the Baccarat blocks it. So it's really just that tiny little window.
Yeah, you know, and I'm focusing on the north just because it's the one side that doesn't have those windows, although I think that it's an important proportional system on this facade to have something as dramatic as an unfenestrated 30 feet of height. It was intended, so,
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the effort was to attempt to match the sort of the primary design facade at the south.
Right.
Here on the north.
right.
All right, other comments?
One more question.
Yes.
Still stuck on the terrazzo.
Okay.
So there are no other areas of terrazzo on the building. This is the only exterior area, and this is the only one that's left. And that's true, right?
Correct, yeah. There's nothing on the 51st Street facade.
And are there is there terrazzo matching on other
We looked
Rockefeller
at the
buildings?
rest of the center. Terrazzo was primarily used as post-war material. We looked at another Carson and London building. I think it's 600 Fifth Avenue. That uses a completely different color palette of terrazzo. 1271 Avenue, the American, the Time and Life building also uses that serpentine sort of gray and blue. I think you guys looked at that just last week.
Yeah.
So we did not find any sort of center-wide consistency to the terrazzo pattern or color.
All right, other comments? All right, I would just, I would agree with Fred that I think that in general, the treatment at the top is, I think, very sensitively done. I think there's already been some changes. I know that they has some concerns about that facade, but I think that given that it's really at a very sort of narrow location that you could actually see it. So I think that that seems fine if it's going to unify the
Yeah, I don't have
facade.
concerns about that facade. I have concerns about losing more of the, this approach to what we'll call the top of the building everywhere.
Okay.
And not so much the north
Okay.
facade. And I think it would be interesting to try to understand the louvering system, since it's been introduced already in the building, in the original building, either the louvers or this perforated metal, and see if something can be, mimicked, achieved, if there can be some visibility rendered through it.
All right, how do the other commissioners feel about the windows at the top?
So the areas
Yes.
of, Cass can
Yes, you want to
explain,
speak,
but
please.
areas of the spandrel are being maintained, it's just where the windows are being installed. Do you want to, Cass, you want to elaborate on that?
I know. I know.
There are sections here where this perforated
Yeah.
spandrel is remaining.
Right.
So it's not as if that detail is disappearing from the top of the building.
I understand.
It's just in the window zone, and I think what we'd end up with, as Richard was describing, is a very, this is meant to be sort of open office spaces. The south side of the floor is detailed. So I think you'd end up, this was mechanical roofing, so you'd end up with, you wouldn't really have the daylighting that you have in the balance of the floor. But that detail is remaining in between the 31st and 32nd floor wherever it exists.
Right.
All right, okay, on the issue of terrazzo, any concerns about that?
Yeah, just a curiosity. Is the interior now floor a square pattern or a rectangular pattern? The one that you're installing currently?
Currently, the existing one is square.
Existing is square, but you're not putting in square. You're putting in rectangular.
Correct. The east-west joints would align with the paneling joints from the original building that we're continuing.
Right.
And the north-south joints would align with the mullion joints that are also original joint.
Right, sorry, I'm being thick here. The interior of the building is square or rectangular?
It's
The interior
it's
is a
square.
random pattern that's not just a rectangle. It's not just a grid inside. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I was asking about the inside.
Yeah, the new or the existing?
Okay,
The
let's
new.
start again.
What you're proposing, right, that's been approved.
Actually, I want to know, it's just a curiosity, both. What was there and what are you doing in terms of the pattern on the inside of the building, square or rectangular? John was asking that earlier.
Okay, well, I can tell you what we're proposing right now is that there's a field of that light colored terrazzo that goes around. It sort of hugs all the edges of the new public space, the new lobby.
Yeah.
And within that field are a series of staggering elements that step back and forth, defined by thin little brass borders. And that's a slightly different color terrazzo inside of those elements. So it's not just a grid.
Right, and that is replacing what? What was there previously? Thank you so much.
Squares.
They are square. That is so surprising, isn't it? Yeah, it's
pass
hard
that,
to
Addie?
tell, of course. It looks like it is a square pattern. And you're saying that the existing interior, I mean, not to dwell on the interior, but just as it might inform the exterior, did or did not align with some of the critical intersections or points of...
My apologies.
Seems.
The
Yes.
interior is not designated, and to be
Right,
honest,
of course.
I don't know.
Uh-huh.
I think that's the short answer.
All right, but I think-
Focused on the pattern. I don't know, Richard, if or
Right, I think that
right.
All right, but the issue is that if the argument being made is that you have this white terrazzo is going to be consistent with what's in the interior, and there's some kind of, visually you see the interior and the exterior connecting, then I think that's why the question is, are you doing the same kind of grooves and patterns in the interior as you're doing in the exterior? And if you're not, then is there a way that you could at least make those unified? Because then otherwise it defeats its purpose.
Right.
So right now you have squares outside. If it connects the squares to the inside, I don't know whether that necessarily will disturb the patterns at the outside, even though you're trying to align them in a way which is critical. So that's I mean, I think that's where we're getting at, which is to somehow unify the inside and the outside. Isn't that correct? Right, particularly because of this change of color and the rationale being that you want to connect it. So I think,
Okay.
so
That seems-
you'd be able to do it,
I
right?
think
So we could
Yeah,
recommend
we
that.
have to look at the way the inside is laid out, but I think some connectivity between the color and the jointing.
Yes,
can
the
be-
jointing,
Can
exactly.
be achieved on the inside and the outside.
So just
Okay.
back to the, I'm sorry, you go.
All right, I think we can,
Just back
okay,
to the windows
last,
for a
but
second.
okay, and then we
Sorry.
can think of closing the hearing.
So there is no, do you all think that there might be another way to approach this last band, this top band of windows that you want to have go around the entire top floor that you're creating for, commercial use, right? That can borrow from the language of the louvering or the perforating, that's not like the windows below, and it's not like the windows that have been introduced on the other facades here and there, 4 and 7. But is something else that is closer to the kind of the louvering system that was original to the building's, details there at that top floor.
I think I understand sort of where you're going with this. I think
Yeah.
this building, and if you look at the way, particularly that historic aerial view, the top of this building and the form of this, there's a regularity to this. And I think the condition that occurs on the north side of this floor versus the south side is it's sort of incidental to a mechanical system that can be different today. And so the regularity of basically the southern half is something that we're trying to achieve around the back of the building. And so I'm not sure that this is a place to have some distinctions between window types, let's say, at the top of the building on the 32nd floor where we're introducing new windows because of the architecture of this building, because of its regularity. So
No, the architecture of this building in elevation has a very strong, opaque, 30-foot cornice that's not, doesn't have
I
windows.
understand, but the visible side, where you perceive this building is from the south, and it's a 20-foot solid band above that 32nd floor line of windows, particularly from the plaza. That's where you see this building, and that's, I think, how it was designed. The designation report speaks about that south elevation as being sort of the primary visible designed elevation. The rest of it was sort of leftover. It was the north end where the mechanicals were pushed. So the fact we are trying to get to that treatment that you see from looking north up the plaza. That's sort of what that design is derived from. It's sort of matching to what was sort of more the finished design versus the sort of unfinished back.
Okay, any more concerns? Okay, then we can close the hearing. And Chris, would you like to read that, please?
Sure. To the matter of 75 Rockefeller Plaza, also known as 1519 West 51st Street, 1436 West 52nd Street, Rockefeller Center individual landmark application is to create window openings at the tower and replace paving at the entry portal. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed removal of selected portions of the historic ridged cast aluminum spandrels from selected bays at the building's 32nd story will allow for the change to office use at this floor, that these removals will maintain the original elongated character and continuous vertical design of the spandrels at the roof parapets at the building's 4 primary tower facades, that the proposed installation of windows in place of these spandrel sections will establish continuous rows of windows at this story, which has been altered previously by the installation of windows at select bays, and therefore will serve to regularize the building's fenestration pattern and enhance the historic uniform horizontality of window bands throughout the facades, that the proposed windows will match the historic windows in terms of configuration, operation, dimensions, details, materials, and finish, that these changes will maintain the historic uninterrupted vertical character of the spandrel bays and the alternating rhythmic visual relationship of the bays and the limestone piers at the building's facades and crown, that the proposed replacement of the terrazzo paving at the recessed West 52nd Street entry portal is warranted by its deteriorated condition, that the terrazzo material of the proposed paving will match that of the historic paving at this portal and at selected other locations throughout the landmark site, that the brass material and rectilinear design of the proposed paving divider strips will match those of the historic divider strips, and that these features of the proposed paving will help maintain this historic paving type at the portal, as well as the consistency of historic terrazzo paving at selected locations throughout the landmark site.
We wanted to add something, right? Yes, okay, so we want to add that. That the jointing of the terrazzo in the exterior as well as the interior will be coordinated and made consistent.
As stated.
Second, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, good. This application's been approved.